Have you ever felt restless for no apparent reason or noticed subtle changes in your behavior that you couldn't explain? Anxiety is a silent giant that often walks in disguise in our daily lives, manifesting through signs that, at first glance, may seem trivial. Now let's unravel together 5 signs of anxiety that often go unnoticed, helping you to recognize them not only in yourself but also in those around you. Sign 5. Difficulty in concentration. Have you ever found yourself unable to concentrate on simple tasks, with your mind wandering to worries or hypothetical scenarios? The difficulty in concentration. That's one of those anxiety symptoms that really caught me off guard. I always prided myself on my ability to focus and dedicate myself to tasks with mindfulness, until I began to notice a disconcerting change. Projects and activities that used to completely absorb me now seemed like insurmountable mountains, and my mind, it seemed to have turned into a television tuned to all channels at once. I remember a specific day, sitting at my desk, trying to write a report. It was something I would normally do with relative ease, but that day, every word was a struggle. My mind wandered to worries about the future, lists of pending tasks, conversations I had or should have had. It was exhausting. And the worst part was the feeling of incapacity that came with it, the frustration of not being able to do something so basic. It was a moment of reflection for me. I realized that my difficulty in concentration was not a character flaw or lack of effort. It was a clear sign of my anxiety. This realization changed the way I approached my work and my daily life. I started implementing small breaks for meditation, reduced multitasking, and tried to create a more organized and distraction-free work environment. These changes didn't solve everything overnight, but gradually I noticed a significant improvement in my ability to focus. Sharing this with you is important because we often quickly criticize ourselves for concentration failures without realizing that they may be symptoms of something bigger. If you find yourself struggling to concentrate, it might be helpful to look beyond the surface and consider what else is happening in your life. Finding ways to manage anxiety may not only help regain focus, but also improve your overall well-being. And remember, being kind to yourself is a crucial part of this process. Onward to the next. Sign 4. Disproportionate irritability. Have you ever found yourself reacting in a more irritable or sensitive way than usual to everyday situations? I remember one day when everything seemed to go wrong from the moment I woke up. I was late, coffee had spilled on my shirt, and traffic was a mess. Normally, I would take a deep breath and move on, but that day, every little setback felt like the end of the world. When a coworker asked, with the best of intentions, if I was okay, I answered more harshly than I would have liked. That moment was a shock to me. I realized it wasn't just a bad day, it was purely anxiety manifesting itself in a way I hadn't recognized. I began to observe more closely how I reacted to situations and noticed that my irritability was more frequent during periods of greater anxiety. This insight was crucial because it made me look for ways to deal with anxiety before it affected my behavior and relationships. Remembering that these signs I discovered along with the therapy as well, discovering the signs is a big step. Dealing with these signs is an even bigger step. That's when I learned breathing techniques, started practicing yoga, and dedicating moments of my day to activities I really enjoyed, which helped to reduce my general anxiety levels and, consequently, my irritability. Telling you about this today is important to me because it shows that anxiety can manifest itself in ways that we don't always immediately recognize. And understanding this can help us to be kinder to ourselves and others. If you often find yourself irritated by small things, perhaps it's a sign to take a closer look at how you're feeling internally. Believe me, understanding the root of these emotions can make all the difference to the way we live and interact with the world around us. Moving on to another sign. Sign 3. Changes in appetite. Another sign that is often overlooked is the alteration in appetite. There was a time when I constantly found myself seeking comfort in food, especially the not-so-healthy ones. It wasn't physical hunger, It was more like an attempt to fill a void or calm a restless mind. Chocolate, potato chips, anything that gave me an immediate sense of pleasure. But then came the guilt, a feeling that only fueled my anxiety even more. On the other hand, there were also times when I completely lost my appetite. Situations of acute anxiety made me feel a knot in my stomach, and the last thing I wanted was to eat. This not only affected my energy and concentration, but also made me more irritable and, of course, even more anxious. It was while talking to a nutritionist that I began to better understand this dynamic. He explained to me how anxiety can affect the hormones responsible for hunger and satiety, and how chronic stress can disrupt our biological clock, including hunger signals. From there, I started paying more attention to my body and the signals it gave me. You know, I never imagined that anxiety could mess with appetite so much until I realized how it affected me. In moments of greater stress, my relationship with food changed completely, and this made me reflect on how anxiety and eating are intimately connected. I learned to differentiate between physical and emotional hunger, and to seek healthier ways to deal with anxiety, such as physical activity, meditation, and even hobbies that relaxed me. I know how confusing and even frustrating it can be to feel like we don't have control over our own eating habits. But understanding that this can be a manifestation of anxiety is the first step to start changing. Taking care of the mind is as important as taking care of the body, and recognizing the connection between the two can help us find a healthier balance in our lives. The next one is one of the trickiest. Sign 2. Procrastination. Who hasn't put off until later what they could do now, right? But joking aside, I want to tell you how I realized that my tendency to procrastinate was more linked to anxiety than to laziness or disorganization. I remember a significant project I had on my hands. It was something I really wanted to do well, but for some reason, whenever I started working on it, I ended up getting distracted by anything else. Suddenly, cleaning the house or organizing my drawers seemed urgent. The deadline was approaching and the pressure was mounting, but I simply couldn't focus on the task that truly mattered. It was during a conversation with a friend that I had a realization. He talked about how his anxiety manifested through procrastination. He avoided tasks that made him anxious, which ultimately only increased anxiety due to the accumulation of unfinished work. That made complete sense to me. I was avoiding the project not because I didn't want to do it, but because I was anxious about the possibility of not meeting expectations. From that conversation, I began to observe my behavior more closely. I noticed that procrastination was an almost automatic response whenever I felt overwhelmed or insecure about a task. Recognizing this was the first step to change. I started applying time management techniques like the Pomodoro technique to help me focus. But more importantly, I began to work on the roots of my anxiety, seeking to understand where it came from and how I could face it in a healthy way. It was through this conversation that I began to consider sharing to help more people. If you find yourself postponing important tasks, it might be worth taking a closer look at it. It's not always just disorganization or laziness. Sometimes it's our way of dealing with anxiety. And believe me, confronting it head-on can not only help reduce procrastination, but also help you understand and take better care of yourself. And last but not least, sign 1, changes in sleep. Sleep. That magical state that should be our refuge after a long day. You know, I always considered myself a relatively calm person until the nights started to become a battlefield. Lying in bed went from a moment of relaxation to a series of twists and turns, with my mind racing, replaying events of the day or worrying about tomorrow. On one specific night, I was exhausted, but my brain just wouldn't shut off. I had an important commitment the next day, and although I knew I needed rest, anxiety had other plans. I spent hours imagining scenarios, rehearsing conversations until I realized all this restlessness was anxiety manifesting itself. And it wasn't just difficulty falling asleep, you see. There were days when I would wake up well before the alarm, heart racing, for no apparent reason. At first, I justified to myself that it was just a phase, or maybe I had slept too much the day before. But over time, I noticed a pattern. These bouts of insomnia and early awakenings were directly linked to my levels of stress and anxiety. Recognizing this connection between anxiety and sleep was a turning point for me. I began to adopt calmer nighttime routines like light meditation or reading a book instead of staying on my phone late into the night. These small changes made a big difference, not only in the quality of my sleep but also in my ability to manage anxiety during the day. Sometimes our body and mind give us signals that we don't immediately understand. But with attention and care, we can learn to interpret them and, more importantly, take better care of ourselves. If you identified with any of these signs, remember, you are not alone, and there are many strategies and resources available to help. In the next video, I can help you identify things that people with anxiety secretly do alone. Let's learn together.